Have you ever felt a connection that didn't fade with time, no matter how hard you tried to let it go? Not something dramatic, not obsession, just a quiet pull that stayed with you even when life moved on. You told yourself it was over. You distracted your mind. You focused on other people, other goals, other plans, and yet in still moments the same feeling returned, not loud, not demanding, just present. Have you ever wondered why some people pass through your life briefly and disappear without effort, while one person seems to remain, untouched by distance, silence, or circumstance? Why trying harder never made it clearer, but letting go somehow brought peace? Most people are taught that love is about effort, that if something is meant to work, you must push, prove, and hold on. But what if the strongest connections don't respond to force at all? What if they respond to something far quieter? You may have noticed something confusing. The moment you stop checking, the moment you stop waiting, the moment you finally accept that you don't know how this will unfold, your chest relaxes, the anxiety fades, and for the first time, you don't feel desperate for an answer. That moment doesn't feel like loss. It feels like relief. And strangely, that's often when life begins to move. A memory resurfaces. A coincidence appears. A door you weren't watching opens. Not because you made it happen, but because something deeper was already in motion. This video isn't about chasing someone. It isn't about forcing destiny or manifesting a specific outcome. It's about understanding why certain connections refuse to disappear and why, when two people are truly meant to be part of each other's path, there is one unmistakable sign that always appears. Not at the beginning, but right before everything changes. If you've ever questioned whether a connection was real or wondered why it didn't unfold the way you expected, stay with me, because what you're about to understand will replace confusion with clarity and longing with quiet certainty. Before we go any further, something needs to be said clearly and without hesitation. There is nothing wrong with you. Not in the way you loved, not in the way you hoped, not in the way you waited, questioned, or tried to understand what was happening. If a connection felt real to you and yet didn't unfold the way you expected, that does not mean you imagined it. It does not mean you misread everything. And it certainly does not mean you weren't enough. Most people grow up learning that relationships work through effort. If something matters, you lean in harder, you explain yourself better, you show more commitment, more consistency, more patience. So when uncertainty appears in a connection, the natural response is to try and fix it. You think, if I say the right thing, things will stabilize. If I understand them better, things will make sense. If I hold on just a little longer, it will work out. That instinct doesn't come from weakness. It comes from conditioning. No one teaches us how to stay grounded when emotions are involved. No one explains that pressure, even when it's born from love, can quietly create distance. So if you found yourself overthinking, replaying conversations, or searching for reassurance, that wasn't a failure of character. It was a human response to uncertainty. And here's the part most people never hear. When a connection triggers strong emotion, it doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something deep has been activated inside you. But without understanding how the inner world works, that activation can feel overwhelming. You may have blamed yourself for caring too much, for feeling too deeply, for not being able to just let it go, like others seem to. But deep connections don't operate on surface logic, and they touch the subconscious. And the subconscious does not respond to willpower. It responds to safety. If you didn't feel safe emotionally, internally, it's natural that you tried to regain control. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. Another quiet truth is this: not every pause is rejection. Not every silence is abandonment. Sometimes distance appears because alignment hasn't settled yet. But when fear fills that space, the mind assumes the worst. You start questioning your value, your intuition, your worthiness of love. And that's the real damage. Because the moment you believe something is wrong with you, you step out of alignment with yourself. You begin to relate from fear instead of certainty, from needing instead of knowing. And no connection, destined or not, can thrive in that state. So if you're here feeling confused, emotionally tired, or unsure what to believe anymore, let this land gently. You were not wrong for feeling what you felt. You were not foolish for hoping. You were not weak for caring deeply. You were simply responding with the tools you were given. This understanding alone should soften something inside you. Because destiny does not punish people for being emotional. It doesn't withdraw because you asked questions, and it doesn't disappear because you felt unsure. What matters is not what you did in confusion. What matters is what you understand now. And now, you're ready to see this connection and yourself from a calmer, truer place. This is where the misunderstanding begins. Most people believe that if something is important, it must be actively managed. They believe relationships move forward through effort, attention, and constant engagement. So when a connection feels uncertain, the mind immediately goes to work. You analyze tone, you reread messages, you replay conversations, searching for the moment something changed. You ask yourself what you did wrong or what you should do next. And none of this feels unreasonable. In fact, it feels responsible. But here is the quiet truth most people never see until much later. Effort does not create alignment. It reveals whether alignment already exists. And effort applied from fear does not bring people closer. It creates pressure. Pressure doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes it looks like checking in, just to be kind. Sometimes it looks like explaining yourself one more time. Sometimes it looks like trying to keep things light while your chest feels tight. But the subconscious reads pressure even when words sound calm. And when pressure enters a connection, something subtle happens. The natural flow disappears. One person starts leaning forward. The other unconsciously leans back, not because they don't care, but because balance has been disturbed. Here's the mistake. People try to secure certainty through action. They believe if they say the right thing, show enough consistency, or demonstrate enough care, clarity will appear. But clarity does not respond to effort. It responds to stability. And stability is an internal state, not a behavior. When you act from uncertainty, even the most loving actions carry tension. And tension is felt long before it is understood. Another misunderstanding is the belief that distance always means loss. So when space appears, the instinct is to close it quickly. But space is not the enemy of connection. Resistance is. And resistance is created when you try to control what is still forming. Many connections fall apart, not because they weren't meant to exist, but because they were handled too early, too tightly, or too anxiously. Think about this. Have you ever noticed that the most meaningful moments in life happen when you're not trying to impress, explain, or perform? They happen when you're simply present. Relationships work the same way. Destined connections don't need constant reassurance to survive. They need alignment to breathe. But most people are taught the opposite. They're taught to prove their value, to earn attention, to keep momentum alive at all costs. So instead of allowing the connection to settle naturally, they interfere with it. And when the other person pulls back, the mind labels it rejection. But often it's not rejection, it's a response to imbalance. This is why trying harder rarely works, not because effort is bad, but because effort without inner certainty sends a conflicting signal. You may be saying, I care. But underneath, the message is, I'm afraid. And fear does not invite closeness, it invites distance. The real problem isn't loving deeply. It's trying to manage love through effort instead of alignment. Once you see this, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself, you stop chasing clarity, and you begin to understand why some connections don't move forward until effort stops entirely. Because what is aligned doesn't need to be pushed. It waits quietly until resistance fades, and when it moves naturally. To understand why certain connections unfold effortlessly while others collapse under pressure, we need to look beyond behavior and into the law that governs all human experience. This is not a psychological trick, and it is not a belief system. It is a principle that operates whether you are aware of it or not. Joseph Murphy taught that life does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to what your subconscious mind has accepted as true. The subconscious mind is not logical. It does not analyze circumstances, distance, or time. It simply reflects the inner state you consistently occupy. This is why two people can desire the same outcome, take similar actions, and yet experience completely different results. One is aligned internally, the other is not. Most people assume relationships are formed through communication and effort. But communication only expresses what already exists beneath the surface. The real connection happens at the subconscious level, and this is where the hidden law operates. Your subconscious is constantly sending signals, not through words but through emotional tone, expectation, and assumption. When you feel calm, certain, and whole, your subconscious is broadcasting stability. When you feel anxious, uncertain, or fearful of loss, it broadcasts resistance, and life responds accordingly. Not as punishment, as reflection. This law explains why forced attraction never works long-term. You can say all the right things, behave perfectly, and still feel distance growing. Because the subconscious hears the fear beneath the words, and fear creates misalignment. Joseph Murphy explained that when the subconscious accepts an idea, it immediately begins to move circumstances, people, and timing to match that idea. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. So when someone assumes, even quietly, I might lose this, life begins arranging experiences that reflect uncertainty. But when someone assumes, what is meant for me unfolds naturally, the subconscious relaxes, and relaxed states invite movement. This is especially important in connections that feel deep or unfamiliar, because those connections don't operate on surface attraction alone. They activate patterns stored deep within the subconscious. Sometimes those patterns involve fear of abandonment, sometimes fear of unworthiness, sometimes fear of loss. And when those patterns activate, the conscious mind tries to regain control. But control is not power, alignment is. Another important aspect of this law is timing. The subconscious mind does not rush. It moves when resistance is low enough for movement to occur. This is why people often reconnect after long periods of separation. Not because time fixed things, but because inner states changed. The fear softened, the need dissolved, the attachment loosened. And once resistance dropped, alignment could express itself. This law also explains why silence can be more powerful than explanation. Words try to convince, certainty simply is. And life responds to certainty far more quickly than it responds to desire. So when two people are truly destined to be part of each other's experience, something subtle happens beneath awareness. Their subconscious states begin to shift toward calm, not simultaneously in time, but simultaneously in alignment. This is not fate forcing people together, it is alignment removing what kept them apart. And once you understand this law, you stop trying to control outcomes. You begin focusing on state, because state is the language life understands. And when your state changes, everything else follows. Now we come to the moment everything begins to make sense. This is where the confusion dissolves, not because you get an answer from the outside, but because something inside you settles. When two people are truly destined to be together, there is one thing that always happens. Not at the beginning, not during the chase, but right before alignment takes over. Both people stop trying to make it happen. This does not mean they stop caring. It does not mean the connection fades. It means the inner struggle ends. The need to control disappears. The urgency softens. The constant questioning quiets down. And for the first time, there is space. This moment often feels misunderstood. From the outside, it can look like giving up, like moving on, like acceptance of loss. But internally, it feels very different. It feels like relief. You no longer wake up thinking about what to say next. You no longer replay the past, searching for mistakes. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's response. You return to yourself, and this return is not accidental. It is alignment. Most people believe connection is created by effort, but effort is only needed when resistance is present. When resistance dissolves, effort becomes unnecessary. This is why destined connections often resurface when you are no longer looking. Not because you forgot, but because you stopped interfering. Interference doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like attachment, like needing a specific outcome to feel okay. like believing happiness depends on someone else's decision. The moment that belief loosens, something powerful happens. Your subconscious shifts from fear to certainty. Not certainty that it will happen. Certainty that you will be whole regardless. And this is the state life responds to. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious acts most powerfully when the conscious mind releases struggle. When effort stops, assumption takes over, and assumption, not action, is what rearranges experience. This is why trying harder rarely produces the result you want. It keeps you focused on lack. It reinforces the idea that something is missing. But when you stop trying to get something, you stop signaling absence. You begin signaling completeness. And completeness is magnetic. This is the point where many reconnections occur, not because someone changed their mind overnight, but because the energetic dynamic changed. The pressure disappeared, the fear softened, the imbalance corrected itself, and once balance is restored, movement becomes natural. This is also why some connections never return, not because they weren't meaningful, but because once alignment settles, it becomes clear whether the path is shared or separate, and that clarity does not hurt. It feels peaceful, because you are no longer fighting reality. You are flowing with it. The one thing that always happens when two people are destined to be together is this. The struggle ends before the union begins. And once you understand that, you stop forcing timelines, you stop chasing signs, you stop trying to predict outcomes. You allow alignment to do what effort never could, and whatever unfolds from that place unfolds naturally. Understanding a principle is one thing. Seeing it reflected in real life is what allows belief to settle. Over the years, this same pattern has appeared again and again across different people, different situations, and different kinds of relationships, not dramatically, not magically, but consistently. The first story is about a man who spent nearly 2 years trying to hold a connection together. From the outside, he did everything right. He communicated openly, he was patient, he stayed available. But internally, he lived in a constant state of uncertainty. Every delay felt personal, every pause felt threatening. So without realizing it, his energy was always leaning forward, trying to secure reassurance. Eventually, the connection faded, and for months, nothing happened. What changed wasn't his strategy, it was his state. He stopped waiting, not as a tactic, but because something inside him finally settled. He accepted that his worth did not depend on another person's decision. There was no visualization, no affirmation, no attempt to manifest anything, just relief. 3 months later, he received a message he never expected. Not a dramatic apology, a simple, honest reconnection. The conversation flowed differently this time. No pressure, no explanation. And because he was no longer trying to make it work, it finally did. The second story involves a woman who believed she had lost the love of her life. For over a year, she replayed the relationship in her mind, convinced she had ruined something rare. Every attempt to move on felt forced, until one day, she stopped focusing on the person entirely, not out of bitterness, out of exhaustion. She turned her attention inward, toward peace, stability, and her own emotional grounding. For the first time, she felt okay without answers, and that was the shift. Weeks later, she ran into him unexpectedly. No planning, no anticipation. The connection felt different, lighter, aligned. What had changed was not the past, it was her state. The third story is quieter, but just as telling. 2 people separated by misunderstanding and poor timing. Years passed, they lived separate lives, but both described the same internal experience. At some point they stopped wondering, what if? They reached a place of acceptance, not resignation, acceptance. And it was only after that inner release that they crossed paths again, not because they tried, but because life no longer had resistance to work around. These stories are not about guarantees. They are about patterns, and the pattern is always the same. Effort creates tension, release creates alignment, alignment creates movement. Not always reunion, but always clarity. And clarity is never cruel. It feels grounded. This is why Joseph Murphy emphasized inner assumption over outer action, because life reflects inner states more faithfully than conscious plans. When you stop trying to force destiny, you stop blocking it. And whether the path leads back together or forward separately, it unfolds with ease. That is the proof, not in extraordinary events, but in the quiet consistency of alignment. Now the question becomes simple. If this is how alignment works, if effort from fear creates resistance and inner certainty allows movement, how do you actually live this? Not in theory, not in moments of clarity that fade, but in everyday life, when emotions rise and uncertainty returns. The first step is this: you stop trying to solve the connection. Most people treat relationships like problems to be fixed. They ask, what should I say? What should I do next? How do I make this move forward? But the moment you ask those questions from fear, you step out of alignment. So instead of asking how to fix the situation, you ask something different. What state am I in right now? Because state determines response. If you feel anxious, your words will carry tension, even if they sound calm. If you feel grounded, your silence will carry strength, even without explanation. This leads to the second step. You stop narrating the problem to yourself. Replaying stories in your mind keeps the subconscious locked in uncertainty. So when the urge arises to analyze, justify, or predict, you pause. Not to suppress emotion, but to return to certainty. Certainty does not mean confidence in an outcome. It means trust in alignment. You remind yourself quietly, what is meant for me does not require force. This is not an affirmation to repeat obsessively. It is a reminder to return to yourself. The third step is allowing space without labeling it as loss. Silence is not rejection. Distance is not failure. Often, space is where alignment corrects itself, but only if you stop filling that space with fear. This is where identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone waiting to be chosen. You begin seeing yourself as someone already whole. And this changes everything. Because from this identity, you don't chase clarity, you embody it. You don't ask for reassurance, you trust resonance. Daily life becomes the practice. In moments of uncertainty, you choose stillness over reaction. In moments of longing, you choose grounding over fantasy. In moments of fear, you choose presence over projection. And slowly your inner state stabilizes. This is not about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming centered. And from this center, life responds differently. Conversations shift, opportunities appear, people feel your calm without understanding why. This is not manipulation, it is alignment. The final step is acceptance without resignation. You allow the outcome to unfold without needing it to define you. And paradoxically, this is what gives destiny room to move. Because you are no longer blocking it with expectation, you are meeting it with openness. This is who you become when you understand this law. Someone who does not beg life to change. Someone who does not force connection. Someone who speaks less but stands firmly in certainty. And from that place, what is meant for you moves toward you without struggle. That is alignment. And once you live from it, you never relate the same way again.